In this video, I'm going to be taking you through the steps that I would take to make a fake skincare brand, complete with product mockups and even social media posts, all within Canva to send off to prospective clients. Because when I first started out as a freelancer and people would ask to see my portfolio, I would freak out and panic because I didn't have any clients or any work to really show off at that point. And I didn't want future clients to know that, obviously. So I would end up basically making up brands to practice on that would help me show off my social media management and design skills to future clients without actually having any real clients to work on. So hopefully this tutorial is going to help you sort of fake it till you make it on your own freelance journey if that's something you're looking for. And now I'm just really excited to get going and show you my fake skincare brand. So within Canva, you will go to apps and mockups, and then have a look at the different categories they've got there in terms of what you could use for your product mockups for this type of project. So I'm going to go to packaging, and you've got, cosmetics, you've got beverages, supplements, etc., etc. So choose whatever works for you. In this case, I'm going to be making a fake cosmetics brand because I also think these are really, really beautiful and apply to a wide variety of businesses. Again, it's just to sort of showcase that you have these skills. So yeah, there's lots of different dimensions to work with, and I am going to play around with a couple in this tutorial. So not to worry if you're like, I'm designing it for this, but it doesn't fit on this. How do I kind of accommodate for that? So we will look at how to do that, but we just want to select a really simple design for now that we can work with, and then we can sort of tweak as we go. Now, we don't have the exact dimensions of this packaging. It is a bit of a flaw in the system. If this was for a real client, you would have the dimensions, of course, but we know this is a vertical post, a vertical canvas. So we're just going to start with some dimensions and tweak as we go along. So within Canva, we are going to be using custom size dimensions. And at this stage, let's just go 1080 by 2400. It might need to be tweaked again. So it's just sort of a starting point. But now that I'm looking at it, I think it's a little bit too tall. So I'm going to go to magic switch and custom size and shrink this a little bit because I think the actual packaging we've chosen is a little bit shorter. That could just be a visual thing, but let's just go ahead and resize this. If you're a Canva free user and you don't have Magic Switch, that's totally fine. You would just start a new project or a new canvas, so not to worry. And again, you can sort of tweak as you go along because I might be totally wrong. And actually, it might have been perfect to begin with. So I'm just going to start bringing in a couple of elements. Within the Elements tab, you can bring in a barcode. Of course, this is not an actual barcode because it's not an actual product, but it'll give it that kind of product look. And as I'm moving it around, you can see these boundaries. You can go over to File, View Settings, and Show Margins to make these sort of permanently be on your canvas just for the time being, so you can place all of your elements inside of this area and organize it neatly to just, elevate your graphic design work a little bit more. And you can start adding in some text from the text area, or you can always hit T on your keyboard to bring in a little bit of your beautiful branded text. In this case, I'm not going to be using my branded font. I'm going to be playing around with some different Canva fonts. So I really like this Lovelace font. Could be Loveless, I don't know, but let's say Lovelace in this case because I think it's got that nice skincare branded sort of look. And I'm gonna call my skincare brand the Maggie Skincare because I do not have a creative bone in my body when it comes to naming brands. So let's just go with Maggie Skincare. This is why I should not have my own skincare brand because it would probably end up being called something ridiculous. Anyways, so we've got this beautiful sort of more elegant font at the top. So let's go with something like Railway. That's a sans serif font. It's a little bit more minimalist to complement it. And we'll just shrink it down a little bit and adjust the letter spacing so that we can pop it just underneath where it says Maggie. So it just nestles in right underneath. Again, it's not an actual logo, so there's no dramas with sort of making things look really, really tidy. But if you do want to put your perfectionist hat on, you can go to Settings and Show Rulers and Guides. Mine are already on. You can also hit Shift R on your keyboard to bring these up. And this will allow you to sort of line elements up on the page. So I can put these just at the bottom of my G's and make sure that the word skincare is sitting at the same horizontal level as the bottoms of that other text, because this can be really hard to do visually. So you can always just hit Shift R on your keyboard to bring these lines up and make them disappear as you're lining things up on the page. Again, it's just a little bit of a hack to make things easier, especially if you're doing package design. When you're working with like tiny elements on a tiny package, it can be really tough to see where things are and how they're playing together. So now I'm just jumping into the Elements tab and bringing in a couple of different elements to just make this a little bit more unique. So I'm putting this kind of squiggle behind the word skincare and using a solid color, not a gradient color, because I don't want it to be, too much. This is for a subtle skincare brand. But the important thing that I want to note here is selecting the images within the mockup section before you start designing this packaging, especially because it's not for an existing client. It's for a fake brand. So you want to make sure that whatever images you're choosing, you're using colors or packaging that complement that. If you're using a pink sort of mockup, then, don't use pink packaging because it's going to blend in. You might want to use a color that's going to be nicely contrasted with that instead. So that's what I've done here, because I know the images that I want to be using will work really well with this. And now that we've got all these elements on the page, it's time to put a little bit of a texture in the background here. So I like using photos of grain in the background and just placing that into the background and adjusting the transparency so that beautiful turquoisey color pops through, but it gives it a little bit of a texture so that it's not just this sort of flat graphic. And that's obviously completely optional, but I do like using texture whenever possible. And I would potentially add a little bit of extra text at the bottom left because it's feeling a little bit empty to me. Now, obviously, if this was for an actual package, then it might have things like, the name of the product and features, benefits, taglines, things like that. Now, at this stage, I don't really want to overcomplicate it because, I don't want to spend hours and hours coming up with names for serums and oils and toners and things I know nothing about, because skincare is really not my thing. So it's more just about having a little bit of design elements around the page to make it feel like it's an actual product and really be able to kind of showcase your skill set to a client. So I'm just going to say, feel good about the skin you're in. Again, I'm not in the business of making up taglines, but let's say that that's what my skincare is all about. So I'm happy with that. And let's go ahead to File, View Settings, and remove the margins so I can have a look at it. And just that I'm looking at it, I'm just going to tweak a couple of last things. So the packaging, I want it to be a little bit more green than it is blue. And I'm just going to add a little bit of boldness to the word skincare to make it pop, because I'm aware that this is going to be on a really small package. So I want to make sure that people are able to read that bit. Maybe just aligning the last few little elements, tweaking things a little bit to make them look a little bit better. Now, you can always use the arrow keys on your keyboard to shift things by pixel if you're not confident using your mouse for this. And then I would create an alternative design. So obviously I've got this kind of minty turquoisey green, and then I would also go with an orange and also change the elements on the page to complement that orange. So because orange and blue are play really nicely together on packaging, because I've got a bit of orange on top of the turquoise, I would basically flip that and add a little bit of that kind of light blue on top of the orange packaging. Okay, so let's now switch on over to our mockup and go to Select and Designs, and we'll be able to pull it straight from the design document we've been working with. Let's go for our orange mockup first and see what that looks like. So it's pretty close. It's got a little bit of a white edge, so I'd go to Adjust Image and I would just go to Fill. So we've got the dimensions pretty good. That's looking really good. So I'd just go to Save Mockup and download that. And then let's move on to using a second mockup that's in slightly different dimensions. I'm going to use this image down here because it's a little bit more square. And then I can just use my turquoisey design and go to Adjust Image and again Fill, and just move it to the top edge. Now there's a reason for this. Obviously I'm not going to be using this package, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a screenshot of where this appears so I have the dimensions, and then I'm going to drag that screenshot into my existing design here, into the upload section. And let's just go ahead and duplicate that page so I'm not messing with my original design here. Now I could go to Magic Switch and change over my canvas size and work with that instead. But this way of doing it is just a bit of a workaround, so you don't have to do the extra work because again, this is not for a real brand or a real client. So what I'll do is I'll just bring my rulers down, and again, it's Shift R on your keyboard, or you can find it within the file section just to get these guides, and then I can delete that background image so I know exactly the space I'm working with for this particular mock-up. And now I can start moving the elements around. Now this is a little bit tougher because I'm dragging a couple of misshapen elements, so I'd go to File and go to View Settings and put my margins back on so I can make sure everything is really nice and aligned. And yeah, I really love using the margins function for this particular reason. And now I can just make sure I'm dragging everything up to fit within this area above that guide there. So that's looking pretty good, and I could basically just save this as an image and put it back on my package and just make sure I'm using the fill function. And let's see what that looks like. Yeah, so that's much better, really nice and clean, and I can go ahead and save that now. Okay, now lastly, let's talk about how to use the individual products that are not part of a scene. So I've just picked this kind of oil dropper situation. Again, skincare, not my jam. So I'm really sorry for everyone who is much better with this stuff than I am. But anyways, I've chosen this and just put a little quick label on it. I haven't bothered to adjust the branding for this because it's more about showing you how to use it in an actual design as opposed to downloading it as an image. So we can just say, use it in a design, these particular dimensions, and now we can pick some templates from the design section within the editor, something like sale because this is a product, and how do we actually incorporate this inside of an Instagram story. So what I would do is I would go to elements and try and find images that complement this product. So in this case, I would just delete this ebook situation, put in something like oil, maybe even go with the suggested more minimalistic oil looks here and right click on that and set the image as background. And now I can just tidy things up that don't really work with what I want to be going for here. And now I can just copy and paste over my product and align it with the background image there. So I think that's looking pretty good. Now I could add in some animations perhaps, obviously much more powerful than just a static story, or I can add in some videos into the background if that suits me better, because this could also function as a reel or a product ad instead of just a story. So I'm going to be looking for some water videos to layer on top of this background image. Maybe something that's a little bit orangey or a little bit of turquoise is what I'm looking for. Just a little bit of movement, nothing too distracting. I like the look of this one, but it's shot from a particular perspective, so I actually think it'll look weird if I twist it in this case. So I'm just going to stretch it all the way out, and let's just go to position and layers and just drag it behind our dropper here and adjust the transparency down. And I'm also going to adjust the length because it's 25 seconds. So it depends on the purpose, but for our purposes here, I'm happy for it to be about 10 seconds long. And let's go ahead and play that and see what it looks like. Yeah, that's pretty good. I could place all the text on top of that video as well to bring it out, make it a bit more bold as well. But for now, I think it looks pretty good. And finally, I could go to edit video and play around with some of the filters to maybe desaturate the background video to bring out that packaging even more. And I think I like the look of that a lot, so hopefully you do as well. This tutorial was so fun to make, so I hope you enjoyed it. And if you do end up doing this for yourself and making up some really obscure brand names for your own fake portfolio, please let me know what they are in the comments. I'm always really curious about this and stuff that people come up with. So definitely let me know, and thank you so much for hanging out with me in this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.